Alright, good morning everyone. I'm coming to you live from the border of Oregon and Washington. We're at Cascade Locks. We're in the little island between the two locks, or beside the lock from what I understand. It's about 9:15 in the morning. I've been a little bit behind on the Oregon updates. The state has went by really fast. And for today's topic, we're going to talk about Oregon Section B, and that goes from Ashland's Callahan all the way to Fish Lake. It was 55 miles. That's actually a very short section of Oregon, but we're going to try to make it interesting. As we talked about in the last video, it was pretty awesome coming into Ashland because we actually made it in on July 4th. What we did was we camped at the shelter right before Ashland. We woke up and wanted to go to Callahan's for breakfast because Callahan's had a hiker breakfast, which was bacon, eggs, and all-you-can-eat pancakes. And the two guys I was with, one of them was from France and the other one was from Luxembourg, and they were really excited about getting into Ashland to see the 4th of July in the United States and experience that like everyone else was looking for that day. It was really perfect. Like I said last time, we got to Ashland to eat breakfast, and then there was a trail angel who was dropping another gentleman off at Ashland's, and they asked us if we wanted to ride in, and we ended up getting to ride in. We got into Ashland and we were looking for a place to stay. Places were booked up. It was July 4th. There were people there getting ready for the parade and visiting and vacationing. But it was actually kind of neat because the place that we found was the Columbia Motel, and it's basically in downtown Ashland. It's around everything. And when we walked to the motel around lunchtime, it was crazy because we were walking through the 4th of July parade. The parade had already started, going through downtown Ashland. And so the guys I was with got to see that, got to see all the floats and organizations walking through. They had a few bands and stuff like that. We walk up to the Columbia Motel, and the room we got was overlooking the street. It was really nice. It's kind of an old motel that doesn't have AC, but they have big windows, giant fans. It's a really cool place to stay if you're ever in Ashland. And we stayed there that night, and the next day I took a 0 day. The guys I was with decided that they wanted to hike out. I took a 0 day and I went to the Ashland hostel and stayed there. And it's a really nice hostel. It's really close to town, everything, all the restaurants and things like that. I really recommend checking it out if you come to Ashland. But around this time, there was talk of a fire. The fire came to be known as the Klamath Valley Fire, I think is what they had called it. And it was burning, and the 5th, the day I was taking a 0, they actually closed I-5, which is the interstate that goes south from Ashland back to where the trail is at Callahan's. So it was kind of a frustrating day. I didn't really know what was going on, whether I'm going to be able to get back on the trail or not. So I stayed that day. I was watching the fire, and it was growing pretty rapidly. I mean, each update was almost doubling in the size of the acres, and it was getting really close to the Oregon border, which is where I was. So a little frustrating. And the next day I didn't really know how I was going to get a ride back to I-5, which is where you get back on the trail. And so I asked the lady at the hostel if there were any trail angels, and she gave me the number of a lady. And I was really lucky. The next day she said she was going to be able to take me at 1, but then she got off work early and she was able to take me at like 9:30 or 10 back to I-5, where you get back on the trail. And there's no smoke that you really see that bad in Ashland, in the town. You could see, of course, over the ridge. It looked a little smoky, but it was really weird going back to the trail, going back to I-5, because it got smokier and smokier the more south you went of Ashland, which is where Callahan's is. So I got out of the car, got on the trail, looked at the trail map, and it was actually a little bit concerning because when you leave Ashland going north, you actually go south for about 3 or 4 miles. So it was kind of crazy going south into the smoke. The smoke flume the wind was blowing north, so the smoke flume was way over the border, and it was kind of concerning. I went south for a few hours, and then I made the turn going northeast around a spot called Pilot Rock. Sorry, there's some giant plane making a lot of noise. Anyways, I turned around Pilot Rock, which is a pretty famous rock formation in southern Oregon near the border, and at that point it was super smoky. It was actually raining ash from the fire. The smoke flume had blew it all the way up there, and it was a little concerning, but we made it through it. And that day I decided to hike a little bit longer day. It was like 20 miles to a place called Hyatt Lake. I camped there. The smoke wasn't too bad, but even the next day walking, the smoke was on and off. Some of it had settled in some low points and things like that. But the next day I decided I was going to go ahead and get up and move to the next place, you know, where there might be camping. I did I think it was like a 30-mile day, and I went to a place called Fish Lake. And the reason I wanted to go to Fish Lake on day 103, that's what day it was, is because they had breakfast there, and I was going to eat breakfast. When I wound up getting there in time for dinner on Saturday night, and they had live music, they had okay dinner, and had free camping for hikers, and it was really nice. The next day I got breakfast, and I walked down the bike trail to Fish Lake at first, and I was hoping I could get a ride back up to the trailhead from walking back to the road. Wasn't able to get it, so I ended up having to do a 2-mile road walk out of Fish Lake. But had breakfast that morning, and it was pretty nice. And that's going to end section B in Oregon. That was really the only fire trouble I've had so far. I'm pretty thankful for that. There's that fire and some other fires in southern Oregon actually closed the sections that I was hiking. I hiked this section, and then the next day I looked at my phone and the section was closed. So all of us that were going north, or if you're a fast southbounder that you got to hike that section, were pretty lucky, because the fire seemed like it was pretty big. It was 100,000 acres plus the last update I saw. So that's where we're at for Oregon section B, and when we come back next time, we're going to talk about Oregon section C.